Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the book launch, The Future of Heritage, Celebrating Arts Management Research at LASALLE, University of the Arts, Singapore. So this is our second seminar in the series Glocal Agenda in the Arts Management Research, Interrogating, Reflecting, and Challenging Traditional Research Canons. So the whole idea of such a research series is to bring to your exposure a lot of exciting, interesting, important research projects that are happening around Singapore. These research projects redefine the industry, they challenge the traditional ways how things are done, and it's very, very important for the development of the industry further. So I hope that it exposes you to some interesting ideas, topics, and gives you some research ideas, especially for my level 3 students. So our seminar today is the celebration of the excellent research that has been done last year by level 3 students. So this is the book that brings together 7 chapters that all explores the future of heritage from all different perspectives and from all different angles. We have there chapters devoted to new media, digital technologies, museums, and also and music. And also we have a very interesting chapter on national identity of Malay people in Singapore, which actually deals with very complex phenomena of cultural amnesia. All these different topics, we bring it under one roof, the future of heritage, because they all inform us what the sector will be in the future, because these are the reflections of the new generation of art managers who are already successful in the field, who got their positions, and their perspectives are very valuable because these are the new voices that we want to hear and that actually will shape up the industry in the future. So the book is the result of the hard work of many involved people, and I would like to thank the head of school, Jonathan Gander, for his dedicated support of this project. Also, huge thank you to our faculty, Michelle Law, who is here with us today, and Amin Farid, who is not with us today. He's traveling, he's super popular with his arts residencies around different countries. So, and of course, I'm very, very grateful for all book contributors. Jordan Tam, Shalin Lim, Ken Exten, Eunice Go, Athira Maswan, Tika Rama, and Joe Akilan. Thank you very much, guys. Your research is very, very valuable. So before we engage in the very interesting and fascinating discussion with our book contributors and our panelists for today, Jordan, Shalin, Ken, Eunice, and Tika, right? So I would like to invite to the floor our first keynote speaker, our Deputy Provost, Dr. Venka Purushothaman. He is an award-winning art writer and academic with a distinguished career in Singapore's arts and creative industries. Venka advances transformative arts education and is the founder of the Asia-Pacific Network for Culture, Education and Research. Internationally, he chairs several art and educational consortiums, serves on the board of several organizations and innovate the field with his leadership on expert panels dedicated to Singapore arts and culture. Today, he will give a keynote on the future of heritage, provoking existing practices. You're very welcome.
Thank you, Natalia. I'm truly delighted, and I'm truly genuinely delighted to be here for the inaugural issue of the Best of the BA Honours Arts Management Dissertation Project. A publication not only celebrates excellence in research, but it is also an insight into an emerging world of new ideas and new possibilities in a fast evolving creative sector. So really, in terms of my keynote, let me quickly jump into 3 areas that I want to talk about. First, the publication. Secondly, the discipline of arts management. and thirdly, my take on heritage's future, right? LASALLE supports publications such as these, and they are essential for very much a rising multilingual Southeast Asia and a broader Asia. They contribute to the critical density of arts discourse of the region, rooted in Asian perspectives, and give young emerging researchers and arts managers a platform to connect and speak for their generational experiences. I'm glad the BA Honours program under Dr. Natalia Grinjeva has ignited this platform to give voice to these students in an increasingly digitalized space. Significantly, it contributes to the larger discourse making of what this discipline, arts management, is all about. We have received and borrowed very much this discipline. Where do we take this discipline very much resides in the kind of research that you actually undertake. So the kind of work that the School of Creative Industries is really fostering is very, very important, because the school is a very research intensive school in many ways. And this is one of the second initiatives that have emerged from the school, and the first one being last year when Sampan, a book of a creative anthology by creative writing students, emerged for the first time in the history. So in many ways, this book is also history in the making. In the many years of the arts management program, this program has really endeavored to really put forth what it is about. But really all this contribution is not just about another publication, another piece of writing, but how do we connect these ideas across generations of similar managers and critical thinkers in the region, in Asia, and how do we position yourselves, not just the institution, yourself as leading thinkers of your time. So these contributions actually play an important part in positioning LASALLE very critically as a leading institution in Asia and building the reputation of the University of the Arts Singapore as an emerging academic player in the larger Singapore research ecosystem. So research is not outside of the creative practice that we undertake. While creative practice itself is research in its multidimensionality, traditional fundamental research is also core to building our base in what we want to say to the world discursively. Now I want to return to the discipline of arts management. And the discipline of arts management is often fraught in many ways in global discourse. So the arts management program started in LASALLE in the 1990s, and to primarily respond for a need for trained arts and cultural administrators in Singapore. It was a time where emerging cultural and creative industries were not meant to be at all. There was no sector called the cultural and creative industries, but seriously just a series of oddly connected communities of practices. And that's what the cultural and creative sector was all about in Singapore. But a community's desire to build a common voice could only be achieved through a shared partnership with the state's desire to build a creative economy, to propel Singapore into a global city. And many of you would have read the history of Singapore's cultural policies of becoming a global city. And many of you, when you study arts policy, you often talk about the global city for the arts in many ways. But the heart of that global perspective is actually rooted in the economic policy, which talks about the global city. And that positioning was important to propel not only the building of infrastructure, but also the software that supported it. But the software also needed to be managed across different constituents: the state, the audiences, the citizenry, and the artist. In this vein, the discipline of arts management has evolved over the years. And in many ways, I was also privileged for being part of that discussion. And there were many conversations in LASALLE and in Singapore about what the discipline of arts management should be about. There were many philosophical and pedagogic debates ranging from the humanities-based approach to supporting the arts as public good to very much supporting the arts, all right, from a US-centric Fordist approach to viewing the arts as an accountable enterprise, a transactional enterprise where arts management became part of the MBA program. And that's where the word manager emerges compared to the administrator, which was very much humanities-based, to coming to an Asian perspective of looking at the discipline through the lens of the socius and the situatedness of the enterprise. And here you look at collectivism, in Asia, which is resplendent with many collectives throughout Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, Singapore, Malaysia, and collectivism as a means of negotiating what arts management should be about. However, one thing was very clear, even at the time: the fact that the programs have successfully navigated these questions to produce a generation of thoughtful and excellent graduates, leading the sector in Singapore and elsewhere. The professional demands of the cultural and creative industries continue to inform the discipline of arts management. However, in a post-COVID environment, new approaches and new literacies in research are needed to study new demographics, new geopolitics, and new technologies that are informing art practices, audience demands, and policy imperatives. And these vectors are continuously shape-shifting as we speak. These new skills sharpen our intellectual muscles to address multiple new languages, principles, and cultural ecologies informing the new. Additionally, it enables us to revisit our cultural compact with society in a digital age. And this is very, very important. So how does a discipline continuously evolve? Not in terms of currency, but how does it continue to remain an important platform or an instrument to reignite the sector, that it is thinking through the sector and enabling the sector to evolve to the next level? And there are many different kinds of questions that the discipline of arts management needs to deal with. It's not just a very simple vector around dealing with the Gen Zs or the Alpha generation, or just dealing with digital technologies. You need to or sustainability for the matter. You need to start to look at what are the kind of core questions that are emerging around the embodiment of the human in the environment. You need to talk about the latency factor of fundamental shifts in technology. We need to understand what does the lifespan of a human entity means vis-a-vis the arts, and what does creativity mean in this moment in time where creativity has become a common buzzword for everything ranging from everyday popular games. So clearly we need to review the cultural compact that we will have. New skills and abilities are required to provide nimbleness to engage with the physical and digital worlds and manage the embodiments they produce. These skills are not only vital to be vigil for the arts, but to also ward off a culture of sameness, which normalizes behaviors and accentuates principally flawed ideas. And here, today, social media plays that part, this culture of sameness. When I was a student of the 90s, we fought against these principles of sameness. There was encapturing society through education, through institutions that we have built. But today, that flip has taken place where social media does create this notion of sameness. And how do you create individuated voices? Which brings, finally, my third point, which is about considering heritage and its future. This title of this book is The Future of Heritage, is a very apt one in this regard. And I look forward to hearing Jervais's point later. But I want to consider heritage and its own plight in relation to cultural practice. And that what is the future of heritage? The emphasis and investment in heritage as an emblem of the past gained speed in the fast decolonizing space and globalizing 20th century. Museums to theme parks to intangible experiences found in artifacts became the lifeblood of destinations, experiences, and creative economies. Through the UNESCO arm and framework for international cultural heritage, the United Nations has led, enabled, and categorized understanding of heritage, the reclamation of pride, the repatriation of loot, back to the decolonized, and so on. I will not get into the scientific data and legal dimensions of it, and much of it is very much available online. Instead, I want to return to something that's a bit more closer to me, which is the philosophy about why heritage must matter. In a vastly different contemporaneous world, any understanding of heritage must negotiate shifting identities, deglobalization, environmental crisis, and digital experience. That heritage must be relational and contextual to everyday experiences. I seek to provoke how we may need to revisit our existing cultural practices and relations in relation to the frames of conveniences or inconveniences. This research that is being published does do that. It continues to produce ways to push the ways of thinking. But here, the question of putting heritage and future together is a contradiction in terms, in many ways. These contradictory terms are fraught with historical exigencies. Preservation of heritage has functioned as a way of writing nationalisms and the notion of as to what the national is. If that is to be the case, there has to be an overriding language that needs to be weaved into that principle, or we will be left with the vagaries of time to insist that the future of heritage must reasonably be temporal, that is time-based, and not contiguous, right? Not relational to where it is. That heritage will always be of the past and not of the future. So in preparing for this keynote, I was trying to kind of go back to my own leanings in philosophy, and I was reminded of a dialogue that the French philosopher Jacques Derrida had with the humanities scholar Elisabeth Rodinescu in this wonderfully lately published book called For What If Tomorrow? And really in the dialogue that he really talks about going back to one's own heritage. So in that, inheriting a past, we must remember that what kind of a philosophy of memory that we are trying to bring forth. And is there a precedence of language that structures what this identity must be? And what affiliation does it necessarily bring? So because heritage, we do not choose heritage, it chooses us as to where we are located, as to where we continue to exist as a community. So in that sense, can it be reproduced unchanged, unmoved, unresponsive? In actual fact, it must be kept alive because it has chosen us and not the other way around. So it is an activation of one's identity that demands reinterpretation, critique, displacement. That is, an active intervention is necessary in dealing with heritage. So what might necessarily be named must necessarily also be ought to be kept alive for the future to come. So in some ways, we also become responsible for the alterity of others. The fact that we are necessarily becoming a counterpoint to heritage. We do not take heritage into the future in its, museumified systems, but we must make it a living structure. Hence, the work of heritage must necessarily be seen as life work, as to what anthropologists would refer to. And what is your life work? In many ways, this is evidenced by the research. It is the life work. So to inherit, there must be an heir. Inherit a tradition or an asset. So who are the stewards of these objects and materials? And who are the stewards of the humans and their ways of life in an increasingly technologically deterministic way? So who's the heir of this heritage? We have three systems of heritage which are passed on, whether it is through someone's location, which is locative, it could be patrimonious, or it could be just passed down. But when we do have buildings and objects and structures, but who inherits? Is it the meek that it shall inherit the earth? And one needs to ask. And in this regard, I often think of the Benin project. In many ways, the repatriation of the Benin scrolls. And in many ways, how do they inherit? And the debates that circled around. So we must think of how the heritage future must locate and bring us into the future. That we must demolish the archaic way of framing heritage, but give it a living history. I have read several chapters in the book and commend the young author's fantastic research. The emerging research presented in the book contributes to the decolonization of the arts management discipline in the very ways that I talked about. In many ways, you're commencing what anthropologists will call life work, an embodiment of work that will continue and contribute to building an appreciation of heritage in a living space. So congratulations to the editor, to the program, the writers, and all involved to this fantastic project. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Venka. That was a fantastic keynote. I really love the idea that heritage is a living creature, and this chicken egg question, who goes first, who owns us, the heritage owns us or we own the heritage, is fascinating and worthwhile thinking further. And also, I really loved your comment about how we are making a history here and thank you for this very in-depth introduction into the arts management field in Singapore, how it evolved, and where we are right now. And we are making a history right now. Isn't it exciting, guys? So right now, let me introduce our next keynote speaker, Jervais Choo. So he's the Deputy Director for the Organisational Design and Innovation and currently has the Innovation Program Office at the National Heritage Board. He's responsible for business and digital transformation through creative solutions to identify and incubate innovative ideas for the heritage sector and to explore the application of digital technologies, including artificial intelligence, autonomous robotics, Internet of Things, virtual and immersive environments in the museum sector. So Jervais founded the DigiMuse program in 2017 to build a vibrant cultural sector, and in the past served as the program director for Singapore Night Festival, the Singapore Heritage Festival, and deputy director for the National Museum of Singapore. So a lot of important positions in the past and right now. And now I give the floor to you, and we are very excited to hear about future of heritage, heritage of the future.
Thank you. Thanks, Natalia. And it's always difficult to follow Dr. Venka. It brings me back to my undergraduate days, listening to him talk about philosophy and heritage and all that. But it's great to be here. I think I will need to use a clicker, right? Right. Okay, so I just prepared some visual references, but you can ignore them if you need to. But I'll start. Really good evening, distinguished guests, friends, and colleagues. Really, it's my pleasure and honor to be able to speak at this event. It's particularly significant and heartening to me to be present at the launch of a publication entitled The Future of Heritage, that is written by future leaders, right, and practitioners of our fledgling but vibrant heritage industry. When Dr. Natalia approached me to speak at this event, I immediately sensed really the genuine pride and excitement that exuded from her as she related the wonderful work undertaken by the students that culminated in this book launch and brought us all here today. And I, like each of you, am looking forward to hearing from the panelists today and to engage in a robust discussion on the future of heritage. My job right now, though, is to preface really that discussion with some personal thoughts and reflections from a practitioner's perspective, gleaned from my varied experiences in the sector. So in my time with the National Heritage Board, I've had the pleasure of being involved in various aspects of heritage work, including industry development, placemaking, museum operations, strategy, partnerships, the list goes on. I was often intrigued and fascinated by the many creative and passionate expressions, really, of our connections with heritage and culture. From the minds of artists that I've seen amazing concepts realized in grand fashion and captivate audiences by the thousands. I think the ongoing Night Festival, I think it's happening last weekend and this weekend. That's an example of how we bring vibrancy to the arts and culture scene. And really equally inspiring is the intimacy of personal stories and memories, as the past is brought to life by ordinary people seeking to relive and rediscover the extraordinary moments of their individual and collective histories. As I go through all of that, invariably, I find myself asking this question. So what is the heritage of our future? I remember a particular project in 2014, which was a collaboration between the National Museum of Singapore and Channel News Asia. It was entitled The People's Collection, which followed the telecast of a documentary series entitled Treasure Hunt. The series involved a call to Singaporeans to bring out objects that they hold dear, and which ranged from intricate memorabilia to cherished heirlooms, which were then presented in a special exhibition at the museum. My involvement in that project led me to wonder introspectively if there's anything I am personally able to leave behind as an heirloom or treasure to share with my children and the generations that come after. And personally, I struggled with that. And the reason is because today, many of our memories and stories are captured digitally in social media, stored in hard disks, right, stored in thumb drives, or even worse, cloud storage that's tied to individual logins that most likely, once we pass on, is not accessible anymore. On the flip side, there's also a perverse assurance that because the interweb always remembers, I know that my digital footprint will most likely survive after me, where my work is traceable online for perpetuity. And I was recently in the US visiting with our counterparts in the Museum of Modern Art, as well as the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and amongst others. And we were looking at studying the efforts at digital collections and preservation, or what we term time-based or born digital media. Now, there's a growing field in museology that is looking at how we collect and preserve such digital media, and the issue is a complex one. Increasingly, museums around the world, and most definitely in Singapore as well, are trying to work out how to collect contemporary. And Dr. Venka, I think, mentioned that as well. Heritage is really not just about collecting of the past. We need to think of the present and the future as well. How would we collect, preserve, and eventually present works of digital art, or digital and online games, or source codes and metadata, right? Things that permeate our understanding of the world today. How do operating systems do anything? If it's an iPhone without a working operating system, is it anything more than a well-designed box? And I'm not even going to venture into NFTs and the metaverse and all that, which is a whole different layer of complexity. But we are constantly learning and hoping to find some answers that can help us along to achieve our mission of having pride in our past and leaving a legacy for our future. Now, so why am I sharing all of this? It's because I believe that it is important that each and every one of us be conscious about how we can lay the foundations to ensure that our stories, our memories, and our heritage can be documented, captured, shared, and proliferated in the future. How the recorded histories and memories of the individual flows into the larger reservoir of our collective cultural awareness and understanding, that we each take ownership of ensuring that the heritage of our future is not lost in translation. It is with this core reflection that I founded the Indigenous Program in 2017, some 6 years ago. The simple premise for the program was that there was a need for local arts, culture, and heritage practitioners to be more aware and in touch with advancements in the technology sector, and that heritage and technology cannot be separated simply because the terms heritage and future are not dichotomous concepts. Rather, in my opinion, they are codependent and symbiotic. The Indigenous Program was therefore designed to provoke thought, introspection, and collaboration in ensuring that conversations over technology and culture are accelerated, and that we can start to build local understanding and appreciation of the need to think of them as two sides of the same coin. And the community responded by bringing together technologists, futurists, and artists. We incubated and supported wonderful new expressions and applications of heritage, which included the use of immersive and extended reality solutions to learn about the artifact conservation. We experimented with the use of AI-enabled interactive chatbots and gamification to encourage new ways to explore and to have conversations with history. We transported visitors into an archaeological site and had them roleplay as archaeologists, discovering our treasures through the use of VR. Artists found new and wonderful ways to express themselves through the use of interactive AR filters, I think which was mentioned in the book. And we deployed robots to help tell stories and guide our visitors in better appreciating the stories that need to be told in our museum. And the work continues to this day. The future of heritage is a big topic on which there's probably no clear definition or consensus on what that might be. To me, heritage of the future is the future of heritage because we take effort and care to collect, to preserve with the intention of ensuring that our future selves and progeny can share in our lived experiences and hopefully shed new light in our collective histories with the benefit of hindsight and wisdom. Our work today is to be able to lay the foundations to allow for that to happen. These foundations can be centered on three basic ideals. The first is that we need to continue to innovate and keep in touch with the technology of our time. Today, my team is pioneering efforts in Singapore to employ leading-edge techniques to digitally document our tangible as well as intangible cultural heritage. And like Prof. Venka mentioned, intangible cultural heritage is evolving. It's constantly evolving. It's not something that is cast in stone at one point in time. And that is important, from artifacts to monument buildings and heritage sites, as well as traditions, practices, and rituals. We aim to build local capabilities to accurately capture and preserve these using 3D and digital techniques, and in so doing enable us to work with heritage practitioners and educators to bring to build greater understanding and appreciation of our heritage. The second is in accessibility, as we seek to transform the way heritage is shared, learned, and experienced. Technology can be both a barrier as well as an enabler to heritage appreciation, and it is imperative that we keep in close view how we ensure that we don't leave anybody behind in this journey. On this note, we talked about democratization of heritage. Can we make it more accessible? Is it just a physical object that we necessarily need to keep within our institutions in order for us to proliferate heritage? And I think in today's world, it's not necessarily the case. And lastly, the third reason is fundamentally the most critical in my mind, and also the reason why we are all here today. And that is to ensure that our people, our future generations, are equipped and capable of not just navigating, but leading us to new and creative ways to collect, preserve, and transmit heritage and culture. The future of heritage lies in our people, our youth and young at heart, who embrace the challenge to take on the work that is ever evolving and constantly adapting. Today we have before us some outstanding examples of those who have embraced this challenge, we shall hear from shortly in Jordan, Charlene, Eunice, and Ritika, and representing their BA Honours class of 2023 in Arts Management. And I sincerely hope and believe that this publication is but a first step in their journey into the rabbit hole, and I look forward with excitement at how they will interpret, affect, and transform the future of heritage. And with that, thank you.
Thank you so much, David. That was a fantastic keynote as well, because it just gave us in a very short time all the big problems that the heritage is facing right now, and all the trajectories for which we have to look as future heritage and arts management, where to find the solutions, because we have young, bright minds and we can address all the problems that you listed. One of the most fascinating problem is how can we translate or preserve the cultural heritage without losing it in translation across generations, across technologies, across platforms, right? Because every day we face a new phenomenon. There was a metaverse hype 2 years ago. Last year it was artificial intelligence. I don't know what happens next. But we all constantly go through all these transformations, and how to keep the heritage live as a living creature, that is a really fascinating question. Right now I would like to invite our panelists to the floor. So please come here. Jordan, Charlene, Eunice, and Tikar, please take your place at the floor, and we will start with a first question. So everybody is really excited to meet you and really excited to learn. First of all, can you present yourself, very briefly? What do you do right now once you finish the BA Arts Management and you're professionals right now, not students anymore, right? So, and I would want you to tell us a little bit about your research. So, and we start with Jordan.
Hi all. I currently work at Art SG as a marketing executive. Do I continue? Okay, so I'll explain about my research. So museums and heritage institutions are digitizing their experiences on social media, especially Instagram, with the use of augmented reality filters. So how they measure the performance of AR filters is usually by Spark AR metrics, which is very numerical. However, the benefits of the arts are very intrinsic and cannot be quantified with numbers. Hence, there is a need of a proper framework that measures the success of such AR filters on social media. I had two research questions. The first one, what are the qualitative dimensions for measuring the effectiveness of AR filters? And the second one, are Spark AR metrics still important for museums? My research methodology consisted of interviews with marketing agencies and creative technologies who have designed AR experiences for the arts, and also did a case study on National Heritage Board's AR filter called the Escape Batik Shop. So through my research, I have found 5 key dimensions that were important for the arts industry, and they were message, edutainment, interactivity, aesthetics, and innovation. However, they also said that quantitative metrics are also important to them. Hence, I have designed a framework through this research that combines both qualitative and quantitative metrics to determine the success of AR filters on social media. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Charlene and I'm currently working at the French Embassy as a Cultural Programs Officer. So my research looks at museums and how they have shifted away from their definitions. So they are now evolving into new heritage spaces which are no longer bounded to their physical locations. So we now see that contemporary museology has seen a paradigm shift where exhibitions can actually exist as museums without walls. So my research goals actually looks at how Museum Without Walls, more specifically eco-museums, can manifest manifest differently in 3 different communities. And also we look at the implications to community symbiosis, cultural education, and local revitalization. So to answer these questions, I actually adopted a case study, 3 case studies actually, and there's research as well that was supplemented with interviews and focus group sessions. So my 3 case studies that I looked at were based in Thailand, Cambodia, as well as Indonesia, and they all appear as distinct manifestations of eco-museums. So the 3 foundations that I actually picked out were actually eco-museums as mobilization. They can appear often with community participation, as well as the mobilization of public spaces and local practices. And then the second one is eco-museum as territory. So they are often characterized by strong rootedness in the community land, which helps to sustain culture and traditions in that land. And lastly, eco-museums as home. So when we look at eco-museums as homes, we see that it's built upon a shared space that is open to the community. So it's almost like a safe and open cultural home to them to learn, share, and preserve local cultural knowledge. So ultimately, my research actually demonstrates that eco-museums share key characteristics across these different communities and nations as well. So each focusing on their foundational tasks, it makes a special impact to their local communities. And through community symbiosis, local revitalization, and cultural education, this actually helps to, really just share their cultures across these different communities. So yeah, that's my research.
Hi everyone. I'm working at MediaCorp's Class 95. I'm the Senior Program Executive right now. And so for my research, because with the growing cultural sensitivity around the world, Disney has actually been developing animated cultural representation films like Coco and Canto, where they are culturally accurate with commercial appeal. So looking at the ACR films, as I call it, as case studies, my research demonstrates Disney's cultural and economical value creation process, and I'm looking at it in the framework of business model canvas. So my research outcome captures the balancing act between cultural accuracy and commercial appeal. So my research questions are, what key activities does Disney use to avoid accusations of cultural appropriation in its ACR films? What key activities do they use to create the films that are both culturally accurate with global appeal? And lastly, how do they translate the creation of cultural value into economical value? So my findings are that Disney uses 3 key strategies to balance economical value and cultural value. First of all, we have internal workforces, where they have story trusts, DEI initiatives within their company, and international divisions around the world to ensure accurate cultural representations. Secondly, we have storytelling mix, where they integrate cultural themes with universal themes. And lastly, we have streaming channels, where they localize content to expand their global market. So all the 3 key strategies actually shows how Disney is able to balance economical value and cultural value, and also to ensure more accurate cultural representation while having to expand a global reach. So that is all for now. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tika. I'm about to start working with the Asia Europe Foundation in their cultural department. So my research actually looks at contemporary Bharatanatyam, which is a dance form originating in South India. But I think it's safe to say that it's grown quite well beyond its roots in South India as well. And I wanted to look at what are the ways in which the functions of contemporary Bharatanatyam are changing for its practitioners, especially based in Singapore. And my methodology was that I drew from my own experiences, so autoethnography, and I also did interviews with 3 practitioners and researchers as well. And what I found was that there are 3 main ways in which the functions have changed for practitioners in particular. The first being that the content and the themes that are covered are a lot more contemporary, in the sense that they are more temporal and relevant, and not just, taking older or culturally specific stories and, religious storytelling. And there's also changes in aesthetic, so the way that it looks, the way that it sounds, the way that it feels. There's also a lot of changes in that. It's becoming perhaps more globally influenced and breaking down borders. And some practitioners are also moving towards a more purely aesthetic use of the Bharatanatyam lexicon, instead of just telling stories from a religious or cultural canon, as I mentioned before. And of course, there is a larger structural relevance as well. The pedagogy is being more inclusive. It is also becoming more anatomically sensitive, so that practitioners can last longer as well. Their bodies can last longer with more sensitivity to anatomy. So yeah, these are the changes that I found.
Thank you so much. That was really, really informative, and you managed to put in so small time so much information about each of your research. Really well done, guys. So, and I'm super proud of you, because all of you sound so smart, and I think some of my level 3 students feel intimidated, because right now for them it's a big challenge to identify what is the topic of my research, what I'm actually looking at, how to explore all these things. So just to help them with that, I ask you to share a journey behind your successful project. So how did you select this topic? Was it informed by your knowledge, background, experiences, exposures? Was it opportunistic in some sense, in terms of access to knowledge or in terms of access to people? So tell us a little bit more what was behind that chapter that is published in the book.
Okay, so why I did this chapter, so I have a background in marketing communications, and I've worked with several art organizations to market their exhibition. So when we generate the marketing report at the end of the campaign, right, the numbers are very numerical. And like I said, the benefits of arts is very intrinsic. So when I see the marketing report is like full of numbers, right, it doesn't tell me anything. So that kind of like sparked this research. Yeah. Thank you.
For me, why I chose this research is that I've always been very interested in community engagement. So I would like to find new methods or ways to connect with the community through heritage and culture especially. So my research was done, I think it took a really long time for me actually, because the topic that I chose on eco-museums is still very new, so there's not much literature review on it. So given that this topic is fairly new, I wanted to do case studies from Indonesia, Cambodia, and Thailand, which all seems very ambitious as well. So I was fortunate that I had lecturers who actually knew people from these organizations, so they could actually connect me with them. And from there, I actually interviewed them at the focus group sessions, and then that's when I learned a lot more about the organizations. And I had to ask them for extra resources, because most of these resources were not in English. So then again, I really had to keep in contact with them, just so that if I needed extra information, I would be able to access them easily. So that was it for me. Yeah.
For me, just for your information, I'm a huge Disney fan, huge. So I've always loved all their movies, and especially in recent years, I realized, like everyone knows that there have been more and more cultural stories that they are trying to present. There's like Coco, there's Encanto, there's really more and more, even Mulan, that they are refilming it. Yes. Yes, exactly. And I just love it so much. So actually, even before I fixed on the topic, I knew that I wanted to write something about Disney. And my topic is value creation in animated films, a critical examination of Disney's cultural storytelling. So I think it's passion and curiosity. I was thinking, Disney being a global brand, how do they bring a cultural story, which is something that's so personal, to a global audience and still manage to get the story being so well received by everyone? So that thought led me into pursuing this topic, and I'm also very fortunate that my supervisor, Jonathan Gander, was very helpful in connecting me with relevant resources that I need. I hosted interviews for my research, and I actually got in contact with employees of the Walt Disney Company from Singapore and also in Florida. And I also got to talk to the animator of Genie, the OG Aladdin. Yeah, a Zoom call with him. He's based in Florida, and I managed to get his insights on the topic. And it's really like meeting your heroes kind of thing. Like, whoa, like they're really doing this thing. So I think I was just very, very enthused and very excited about pursuing this topic. And I learned a lot from my research topic in terms of how, like, the effort that goes into ensuring that the culture is being accurately represented, and how they try to increase that commercial appeal to also gain financial gains for the company. So I think that is my journey. Thank you.
Okay, my journey was very different. I was in a completely different place in the beginning, well past my proposal. So if any of the students are worried about like your proposal being the kind of like final spot, I think don't worry too much about that, because what I submitted for my proposal was completely different. And I actually tried to avoid doing this particular topic as part of my research, because I've had quite a fraught relationship with dance, with Bharatanatyam. So it was quite I was a bit afraid to touch something that was so personal to me. So I was at a crossroads at a point just after submitting my proposal, and I was like, I don't know if maybe the topic that I was doing is what I want to do. And my supervisor actually told me something very important that I think will continue to stick with me, which is that if you don't discuss this in this like position that you are in, then who else will? And so I felt that, okay, you know what, like as scary as it may be, and it still is very scary, I thought that, okay, you know, I can maybe take this on as a topic, and if not cover the entirety of it, at least provide some sort of a starting point and discuss the trajectories that it might go for future researchers. So I wanted to kind of take the first step in that sense. Yeah, so it was not easy, but eventually I ended up, I guess, where I was supposed to. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing these fascinating stories behind your research. So I think it should give some food for thought for my level 3s and help them to find their own research topic. So my next question to you guys is, what is the impact of your research, or potential impact of your research? Or what are the implications for the arts, creative or heritage industry? Who do you think would be interested to tap on the knowledge that you generated through your research projects? So how it could inform the future of our heritage? I would really appreciate if you can elaborate on that.
Yeah, sure. So with my new measurement framework that I've designed, I believe that people working in the marketing department in the arts and cultural industry would be more than happy to take reference from the framework, especially people working in museums. And I believe that they would want a more accurate representation of the success of their AR filters past the numerical data. And with the framework, I also believe that with the qualitative dimensions, it can serve as a guideline to these organizations to develop more engaging AR experiences for their relevant audiences. And I think this is quite important, especially for people in the cultural industry, because one of the dimensions is called edutainment. And in the social media space, right, people have very little attention span, and with cultural institutions wanting to educate their audiences, it's important to always like grab their attention. So with this framework called edutainment, which is the combination of education and entertainment, I think they can use this as a guideline to create more engaging experiences when they want to educate their audiences when their attention span is very short.
For me, because I did my research on eco-museums, I certainly believe that my results could be useful for museums or non-profit organizations or even cultural organizations with an interest to develop long-term community engagements with the community. So in my research, I found that these eco-museums are actually highly mobile and they don't conform to physical spaces or buildings. So in the context of Singapore, where space is limited, the concept of using eco-museums could work really well for community engagement. So for example, I found out that eco-museums as mobilization can help to draw community participation as well as mobilization within public spaces. So it can help to actually foster identity as well as active citizenry. So that is one example. And also because I found out that eco-museums could work as like homes, cultural homes. So I believe that, you know, the adoption of practicing, you know, a shared space, like for example, the void deck or community centers could be designed as a shared space for the community to, you know, share their local culture and knowledge as well. So that's what I feel about my research.
So my topic is about value creation. So when we talk about value, there's two types of value. There's economic value and there's also cultural value. So when we talk about business model canvas, it's typically focused on economic value and the functional value. Like how do they create financial gains to the company? But my paper stressed that we also need to look at the cultural value and see how that contributes to the economic value as well, because they are related. So I actually proposed an yin-yang framework. Not sure if you guys are familiar with it. Show you guys. Yes, an yin-yang framework where we have the cultural value at one piece and the economical value at one piece. But within these two pieces, we have the dot. Yes. So the dot actually covers, so for example, for cultural value, the dot covers how the balance between cultural value and economical value. For example, cultural value, we look at how Disney focuses on ensuring accurate representation in their storytelling. However, the dot is that by taking that accurate cultural story, they actually include universal storytelling. So if you recall, like all the Disney films that you saw, like Coco and everything, even though they are portraying a certain culture, there's always a universal theme that ties everyone together: family, friendship, personal growth, or just any struggles that we all share. So that's how they tie cultural value with universal value and hence turn that into economic value. So that's just an example. So with this research, I feel like creative industries, the managers, or even storytellers, it's important for them to really look at how it's like arts managers, you shouldn't just focus on the business aspect, you should look at both arts and the business aspect. So it's really about the balance between the two, and I think my framework can really help in terms of guiding them to see what are the key strategies and what resources can be used to achieve that balance.
Okay, for me, I think if you ask me honestly, I would say that everyone should care about it. But I think I say this because yes, while it is important for practitioners, managers, of course, to I guess know more about this, it also raises, while I am talking about dance mainly, I think it also raises very important questions about what it means to pass on a certain tradition, or what it means to practice an art form, or what it means to even, you know, like when you consider things like heritage, what it means to pass on heritage in that sense, or keep it alive. And so there is also an idea that perhaps it is enough to keep it alive, and you know, I would say that maybe we should also aim to keep it relevant as well and not just alive. And so I guess that's why I say, you know, everyone should care about this, because even if we don't practice a particular tradition or a particular art form, I think it is important for us to question the kinds of things that we pass on to not just future generations, but also amongst ourselves as well. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That we can see, definitely we can see that there is a high value in whatever you produced for this book. And I have a last question for you today. So how do you see the future of heritage? So I want you, based on your previous and current experience, to identify at least one big trajectory that you think the heritage should take in order to preserve it intelligently for the future generations to come. So are there any big points right now, or what are the strengths that you can identify so the heritage can be preserved for the future?
So I see the future of heritage in Singapore. They use a lot of social media to get their message across to their audiences, and the use of era filters on Instagram. So this is why I wrote my whole dissertation now. So because era filters, right, it gives audiences an experience that they don't have to like go to the museum and experience it. It transcends physical boundaries. And I think, like I mentioned before, the entertainment aspect of the era filter is very important. So how does an institution educate their audiences without making it boring? And everyone's attention span is so short right now. If you are doing like a static post on social media describing the history of Singapore, people might just scroll past. So I think there's this value in era filters on Instagram. And I think the strong point of this trajectory is like what NHB has done with their DigiMuse efforts, with the Escape Batik Shop filter. So that filter was to actually educate audiences and to share what Batik is and what the Malay culture is. And I see the potential there lah.
For me, the way I see it is that there will always be opportunities to strengthen both heritage and culture in Singapore. And one of the most accessible ways to do it is actually through community symbiosis. So through community symbiosis, I have identified in my research that it really looks at establishing long-lasting, trustful, and dynamic relationships with the local communities and the environment. So it is essential in Singapore, especially the organizations like museums. Perhaps they could be more encouraged to look at being more inclusive, diverse, and not to focus on being representative. So I feel like, you know, these are certainly ways that, you know, we can help to strengthen the heritage and culture in Singapore. Yep.
I'm looking at Disney, so I actually spoke to an animation development manager at the Walt Disney Company Southeast Asia division. Yes, so Disney have been producing animation films that feature local cultures. So there's this certain one called Mickey Goes Local, where they feature like, you know, Nyonya and even the Georgetown. There's also satay, all these local elements that you wouldn't think would appear in a very Western like Disney sort of image. So I think these little efforts of like incorporating more cultural elements or cultural values into their animation project is something that they are doing to preserve local heritage. Because do know that Disney has a few divisions across the world. So each of the divisions are glocalizing their heritage, localizing the heritage to really push and to preserve the heritage. And I think it is a very effective manner because while keeping their mass appeal and the universal theme that ties everyone together and that appeals to everyone, they still keep their cultural themes there, which I feel is very helpful in terms of really preserving heritage for future generations. Especially right now, we are consuming all those Disney content, not just Disney, like entertainment content. So I think it's those little changes and the initiatives that they take to incorporate more cultural values in the content that we consume is how that they are trying to preserve the heritage. Yes.
I think the future of heritage for me, when it comes to, I guess in this case it's intangible heritage, is really just that I think the future is really going to be more lateral developments as opposed to maybe linear, passed down through generation kind of development. It will, especially with traditions like Bharatanatyam, I think we have to also accept that everybody comes with their own baggage. Every practitioner and every student will come with their own baggage, and so it is important to also acknowledge and accept that baggage and not, I guess, kind of gatekeep heritage and tradition, because traditions like these and I guess art forms like these are not limited to any one particular locale anymore, and they're not limited to one particular lineage or family. So I think it's important to accept that there will be, instead of looking like, I guess, a line, it will probably now look more like a spider web, because there are just so many different concurrent developments happening worldwide. And I think we have to come to terms with that, and in order to keep heritage alive and also relevant.
Thank you so much for your so insightful projections into the future. We're really, really grateful for all your insights that you shared with us today. So at this note, I would like to close this event. I invite everybody to stay with us a little bit longer after the event and direct all your questions to these guys. They are amazing, and congratulations to them. I also would like to thank again our fantastic keynotes, Dr. Venka and Jervais, for presenting the future of heritage from two different perspectives, from academic and from the industry. Thank you very much, Wolfgang, for coming here, for supporting the project, and thank you so much, Malar, also for being here. It means a lot to us. Your support is really valuable. Thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to host this event here right now to make the history of arts management in Singapore. Thank you, everyone, and we see you next time, next Thursday at 6 o'clock for another seminar, which will be on new technologies, and we will be talking about all this hype about new technologies and if they are a peril or an advantage for research. Thank you.